Hello students, welcome to session 1 of chapter number 17 of your first PUC NCERT, that is breathing and exchange of gases. So here we will be starting with the human physiology now. In human physiology we will be studying about different types of organs, organ system and their function as well as disorders in detail. So when it comes to breathing or respiration is the term what is used to represent this breathing. What is breathing? Breathing means it is exchange of gases. So next question arises, between whom? Yara madhye ee exchange aguvantadu. This exchange takes place between the atmosphere as well as the human body. So next question comes, what do we exchange with the atmosphere? So there are gases which are exchanged between the atmosphere. Next question comes, which particular gases? So here it will be oxygen as well as carbon dioxide. So normally atmosphere contains groups of gases, but our concentration is more on oxygen. We draw oxygen from the atmosphere and exchange it with the carbon dioxide which are produced in our cells. So to define breathing, breathing means it is exchange of gases between the atmosphere and the human body, where the human body or the human body cells will be exchanging carbon dioxide for atmospheric oxygen. So when it comes to different types of respiratory methods, in case of smaller organisms, now we will study about respiratory organs. So respiratory organs in case of smaller organisms like some of the invertebrates like flatworms and all, these or coelentrates you can take, sporiferans you can take, these invertebrates normally respire with the help of a process of diffusion. So directly atmosphere in the gases will be moving into the body of the organism. Atmospherally ee gases the concentration will be high compared to the inner region of the body of the organism. That is why simple diffusion process mukhantara respiration process avugalali agutte. Next, when it comes to earthworm, that is with the help of moist cuticle. Moist cuticle means through their skin surface they undergo the respiration in case of earthworm. Some of the insects, these two undergo respiration through tracheal system. So tracheal system is the type of respiratory organ which is present in few of the insects. Next is in case of mollusk, few of the aquatic arthropods here the respiration will be through gills. So gills are the one which helps in respiration in case of mollusk as well as few of the aquatic arthropods. Next one, when it comes to spiders, they have special respiratory organs called book lungs. And when it comes to higher organisms, especially like human beings, amphibians or chordates in general, we have proper developed lungs which help in respiration. Few of the organisms, especially fishes, also have gills for respiration. You have studied about this regarding the operculum, presence of operculum, presence of gill slits in animal kingdom. So fishes normally have gills or gill slits and operculum to cover especially the aquatic freshwater fishes. Next, when it comes to frog, especially in frog, we can find three different types of respiratory organ. When it is in its tadpole stage, that is in its larval stage, they respire with the help of gills. When it becomes adult, the gills will be replaced by lungs, and when they are in the condition of aestivation, that is what we call summer sleep. Whole season ge they cannot tolerate the higher temperature. That is why the whole season in them is spent taking rest or sleeping. That is what is called aestivation. During this aestivation process, they respire with the help of moist skin. So in a frog itself, there are different ways of respiration based on what age or what condition they are in. They either respire through gills or lungs or through moist skin during aestivation. So that is how different types of organisms have different types of respiratory organs, but all of them function in a same way, which helps in exchange of gases. So in this chapter, we will have to study about human respiratory system. To study about human respiratory system, we should know which is the organ which helps in this respiration process. It involves the pair of lungs which is present in our thoracic cavity. First we will learn the diagram of human respiratory system, then we will study the function of each and every organ. So this is the diagram of a human respiratory system. When it comes to human respiratory system, I told you that it involves pair of lungs. So this pair of lungs is present in the thoracic cavity, where the left lung is slightly smaller compared to the right lung. The reason why, because the heart normally pushes the left lung a little bit to the left side. So now when it comes to the human respiratory system, we'll study about the diagram. So initially the air, for the exchange of gases in the breathing process, the air from the atmosphere passes into the nostrils. There are two openings in your nose which helps in taking up of this air. So this pair of nostrils are present just below the upper lip. From there the air passes into the nasal chamber. So in the nasal chamber, it contains small hairs which helps in clearing or trapping the impurities. ಮೂಗಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಸಣ್ಣ ಸಣ್ಣ ಹೇರ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಡರ್ಟ್ ಅಥವಾ ಡಸ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ಟ್ರ್ಯಾಪ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡುತ್ತೆ. Once the dirt or dust is trapped in the nasal region, the only air is passed into the next region, what we call pharynx. Now pharynx in respiration, it is termed nasopharynx. This pharynx is a common region for both food as well as for air. But here, as we are talking about the air, it is called nasopharynx. So from the nasopharynx, the air is later passed into the next region, that is larynx. Once the air passes into the pharynx, it should be passed on into the next region, that is through the larynx. So for this purpose, there is glottis which guards the air not to get transferred into the digestive tract, and instead this glottis directs the air to move into the larynx region. ಈ larynx region ಅನ್ನು ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಏರ್ ವಾಯ್ಸ್ ಬಾಕ್ಸ್ಗೆ ಪಾಸ್ ಆದ ತಕ್ಷಣ you can hear a voice which is generated. So once the air passes into the voice box, later it travels into a tube-like structure that is called trachea. This trachea is a very soft structure, but it stands still with the help of structures called this pink colored structures, what you can see here, ring like structures. These are called cartilaginous rings. Because of this cartilaginous rings, the trachea stands still, or else it is a soft structure, it might get collapsed. So ee trachea dalli madhyadalli tracheal rings iro karana ee trachea still agi stiff agi nillutte. Illa anta helidre this is a very soft structure which might get collapsed. This trachea is further divided into structure called bronchus or bronchi. There are primary bronchi and secondary bronchi. So primary bronchi penetrates into the lungs here. So when it penetrates into the lungs, what happens is primary bronchus is divided into secondary bronchi. It is further divided into tertiary bronchi. This tertiary bronchi terminates within smaller fiber-like structure. These are called bronchioles. First primary bronchi irutte. Ee primary bronchi secondary agi divide agutte. Secondary tertiary agi divide agutte. Tertiary inda they will form small branches. These branches are called bronchioles. These bronchioles end with the structure or a bag-like or sac-like structure. These structures are called alveoli. This alveoli helps in exchange of gases between the atmosphere and between the body. Cellal iruvantaha carbon dioxide atmosphere ge transfer agbeku. Atmosphere inda oxygen should be transferred into the cell. So this function is carried out by this bag-like or sac-like structure which are called alveoli. Okay. So when it comes to the human respiratory system, it initiates with the nose, that is the nostrils, from where the air is transferred inside. The air is then transferred into the nasal chamber, then into the pharynx, and glottis guards it into the larynx, and finally reaches the trachea, which is supported by cartilaginous rings, which are further branched into primary, secondary, tertiary, which ends up in bronchioles. This bronchioles at its end contains sac-like structure which are called alveoli, which helps in exchange of gases. Next, when it comes to the lung region, here the lung is having double layer. These are called pleural membrane. So this pleural membrane helps in protecting the lungs. In between these two outer and inner pleural membrane, there is a fluid which is called pleural fluid, which helps in avoiding friction. So, this helps in protecting the lungs during friction. Lung in the thoracic cavity is protected by 4 different regions. That will be from the dorsal side, that is himbadiinda vertebral column ee lungs anna protect madutte. If this is the vertebral column, the lungs will be placed here. So, from behind lungs, vertebral column will be protecting. From the lower side, they have diaphragm. This is the region which is called diaphragm, which maintains the rhythm of breathing, that will be protected. That is, from the lower side, you can protect your lungs with the help of diaphragm. From the front region, that is from the ventral region, there is a flat structure which is called sternum. Sternum is the region which protects the lungs from the ventral side, and from the lateral side they have ribs. Ribs come like this and protect the lungs from within. So, this is the cut ribs what I have drawn here in blue color. So, this cover the lungs like this and protect the lungs from all the 4 sides. So, behind it is, that is in the dorsal side, with the help of vertebral column, on the lateral sides with the help of ribs, on the lower side with the help of diaphragm, in the front with the help of sternum. Ee ribs ella bandu ee sternum ge join agutte. So, that is how lungs get protected from all the 4 sides, the lower side, the lateral side, ventral as well as the dorsal side. Now, you might wonder if the atmosphere, now in Mysore as it is winter, the temperature is very low here. So, the temperature in the atmosphere is very low, but our body temperature, we are warm blooded animals, adanna homeotherms anta karitivi. So, ee cold air body olagade hodre will not be there any problem. So, here there is no problem. Why? Because when the air enters into the nasal chamber, ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಸೀಲಿಯಾ ಆರ್ ಹೇರ್ ಲೈಕ್ ಸ್ಟ್ರಕ್ಚರ್ಸ್ ಡಸ್ಟ್ ಅನ್ನು ಪ್ರೊಟೆಕ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ನೇಸಲ್ ಚೇಂಬರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಬಾಡಿ ಟೆಂಪರೇಚರ್ಗೆ ಏರ್ ಅನ್ನು ಅಡ್ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡುವಂಥ ಕೆಲಸ ನೇಸಲ್ ಚೇಂಬರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರುವಂತಹ ಸೆಲ್ಸ್ಗಳು ಮಾಡ್ತವೆ. ಸೊ ಈವನ್ ದೋ ದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟರ್ನಲ್ ಎನ್ವೈರನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಇಸ್ ವೆರಿ ಹಾಟ್ ಆರ್ ವೆರಿ ಕೋಲ್ಡ್, once the air enters into your nasal chamber, that will be converted into your body temperature. That is how we maintain the temperature of the air while breathing. So, that is about in detail about the human respiratory system. So, that is about pair of lungs, how the air gets transferred inside, how there will be alveoli which helps in exchange of gases, and how there will be protection of lungs on ventral, dorsal, lower as well as lateral region. So, that is about human respiratory system. Next we will have to study about mechanism of breathing. So, breathing takes place by 2 different steps. One is inspiration and another is expiration. Inspiration is breathing inside, expiration is breathing outside. So, just to give in one word, inspiration is breathing in, expiration is breathing out. So, when it comes to inspiration, the atmospheric air enters into the thoracic cavity or into the lungs. Whereas, when it comes to expiration, the air present in thoracic region or in the lungs moves out into the atmosphere. So, that is what is expiration. Inspiration is taking up air from the atmosphere into your lungs, and breathing out or expiration means from the lungs the air is sent outside back into the atmosphere. This inspiration or expiration takes place only when there is a pressure gradient. when there is a pressure difference in between the atmosphere as well as between the lungs, then there will be exchange of this gases, what is termed pressure gradient. And the respiration which takes place through lungs, it is termed intrapulmonary respiration. Intrapulmonary respiration means here the inspiration and expiration involves the exchange of gases between the atmosphere as well as the lungs which are present in the thoracic cavity. That is why this exchange is termed intrapulmonary respiration or exchange. For this exchange, it requires a particular type of pressure gradient. Now we will study about this mechanism of inspiration and expiration in detail. So when it comes to intrapulmonary pressure and atmospheric pressure, in case of inspiration, you can see a diagram which is represented on the screen. When it comes to inspiration, there are different process or changes taking place in the thoracic cavity. Inspiration aguvaga ಗಾಳಿ atmosphere in the body ಒಳಗಡೆಗೆ ಬರಬೇಕು. So here what should happen so that the air from the atmosphere enters inside means what? The atmospheric pressure should be more than intrapulmonary pressure. Atmospheric pressure should be more than intrapulmonary pressure. For this purpose, what happens is there will be contraction of diaphragm and external and internal intercostal muscles. These muscles are present between ribs. So there will be contraction of this diaphragm, external and internal intercostal muscle. If you see, this is the rib cage. Between this rib cage, there will be these muscles. So these help in contraction and leads to changes that takes place in the rib region. This is the second step where there will be contraction of diaphragm and external and internal intercostal muscle also undergo contraction. So where is this diaphragm? Diaphragm is present at the base of the lung, that is in the lower region. So normally diaphragm is dome shaped. During contraction they become flat. So this flat diaphragm and contraction of intercostal muscles help in increasing the size of the thoracic cavity. The size of the thoracic cavity increases. Increase ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ the thoracic cavity moves front as well as upward. As the thoracic cavity moves forward and upward, what happens? The thoracic cavity size increase ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, thoracic volume increase ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, pulmonary volume also increases. Pulmonary volume increase ಆಯಿತು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ pulmonary pressure ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ? Reduce ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. There will be reduction in the pulmonary pressure, that is intrapulmonary pressure reduces. How does this intrapulmonary pressure reduce? Because of increased thoracic cavity size. This increased thoracic cavity size also increases the pulmonary volume. Pulmonary volume increase ಆಯಿತು, automatically there will be a reduction in the intrapulmonary pressure. So now the intrapulmonary pressure is lower than atmospheric air. ಈ ತರ situation create ಆದಾಗ atmospheric air rushes into the thoracic cavity, especially into the lungs. This is how inspiration takes place. Once again to discuss, there are certain changes taking place in the thoracic cavity so that the atmospheric air enters inside. During inspiration, the atmospheric pressure should be more compared to the intrapulmonary pressure. To have a drop in the intrapulmonary pressure, the thoracic cavity, especially the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, undergo contraction. The dome-shaped diaphragm becomes flat and there will be contraction of external and internal intercostal muscles. These muscles are present between the ribs, which helps in contraction. Once this contraction takes place, now the thoracic cavity moves upward and forward. You deep breathe ಮಾಡುವಾಗ you can feel that your thoracic cavity has moved forward. It also moves upward. So this forward and upward movement creates large amount of space in the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity increases this space, automatically there is a pulmonary volume also increase. This increased pulmonary volume automatically reduces the intrapulmonary pressure when compared to the atmospheric pressure. That is how now the atmospheric pressure is more compared to the pulmonary pressure and the atmospheric air rushes into the thoracic cavity to complete the process of inspiration. Same thing is represented in the diagram there, which represents the inspiration process. Next process is expiration. So we have to learn about different changes that takes place during expiration. Those will be you can see the diagram in the screen here. During expiration, exact opposite what have taken for inspiration takes place. So here expiration ಆಗಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ atmospheric pressure should be less, intrapulmonary pressure should be more. So inspirationally it was opposite, atmospheric pressure ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರಬೇಕಿತ್ತು, intrapulmonary pressure ಕಮ್ಮಿ ಇರಬೇಕಿತ್ತು. Here exact opposite takes place. Next process, that is contraction. Here it is relaxation. Relaxation of diaphragm, relaxation of intercostal muscle. So the original dome shape of the diaphragm is replaced back now. What happens to the thoracic cavity? The thoracic cavity, which had moved forward and upward, will be moving now backward and downward. These are the changes which takes place during expiration. So during expiration, the atmospheric pressure should be less and intrapulmonary pressure should be more. Relaxation of diaphragm takes place as well as intercostal muscles between the ribs also takes place. Thoracic cavity, which was moved forward and upward, will now move downward as well as backward, andre getting back to its original position ಆಗುತ್ತೆ thoracic cavity ಗೆ. ಈ process ಆಗುವಾಗ thoracic volume ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ reduce ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. Thoracic volume reduce ಆಗುತ್ತೆ, pulmonary volume also reduces. When there is reduction in the volume, the pressure will start to increase. So intrapulmonary pressure will increase now, which will be more than the atmospheric pressure, what you can see in the diagram here. So intrapulmonary pressure increases, atmospheric pressure increases more than atmospheric pressure, and then air from the lungs is pushed out into the atmosphere. This is how the process of expiration takes place. So that is how the pressure affects the inspiration as well as expiration in case of mechanism of respiration. Once again to revise, during inspiration, the atmospheric pressure should be more compared to the intrapulmonary pressure. This happens because of the contraction of diaphragm and intercostal muscles between the ribs, which helps to increase the thoracic cavity, in turn increases the pulmonary volume, reducing the pressure, so that the air from the atmosphere is transferred inside. Next process will be expiration, where the intrapulmonary pressure should be more compared to the atmospheric pressure. During this process, what happens is the air from the lungs should be pushed out into the atmosphere. For this purpose, there will be relaxation of diaphragm and retains back its dome shaped, and intercostal muscles also do relax, where the movement of the thoracic cavity will be downwards and backwards. This reduces the pulmonary volume and increases the pulmonary pressure, so that there is exchange of gas between lungs and atmosphere. This is how the mechanism of respiration takes place. Next, we will have to study about different types of respiratory volumes. Those will be respiratory volume and capacity. So, there are 9 different types of respiratory volumes. Tidal volume, inspiratory residual volume, expiratory residual volume, residual capacity, residual volume, inspiratory capacity, expiratory capacity, functional residential capacity, vital capacity, and last one is total lung capacity. These are the 9 different types of respiratory volumes and capacity which come under human respiration, that is tidal volume, inspiratory residual volume, expiratory residual volume, inspiratory capacity, expiratory capacity, functional residential capacity, vital capacity, and total lung capacity. So, you will have to study about each of them in detail. It is a very important concept regarding your exam point of view. One out of this will be a 1-mark question in your exams. So, we will study about each of the volume in detail. So, when it comes to tidal volume, it is volume of air inspired or expired during normal respiration. ಅದರ ಅರ್ಥ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಳಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಅಥವಾ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ರೆಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಪ್ರೋಸೆಸ್ ಆದಾಗ ಅದನ್ನು ಟೈಡಲ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ರಿಸರ್ವ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್. ಸೊ ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ additional volume of air a person can inspire by forcible inspiration. Some amount of air ಅನ್ನು ನಾವು ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಬ್ರೀದಿಂಗ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇಂಟೇಕ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. ಜೋರಾಗಿ ಉಸಿರಾಡಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದಾಗ ಎಷ್ಟು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಳಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಬಾಡಿ ಒಳಗಡೆ ತಗೋತೀವಿ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ರಾ ಅಥವಾ ರಿಸರ್ವ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So it is additional volume of air a person can inspire by forcible inspiration. Next one is expiratory reserve volume. So it is additional volume of air a person can expire by forcible expiration. So here ಎಷ್ಟು amount of ಗಾಳಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಬಾಡಿಯಿಂದ ಫೋರ್ಸಿಬಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಆಗುವಾಗ ಆಚೆ ಕಳಿಸ್ತೀವಿ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ರಿಸರ್ವ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. Next is residual volume. So it is volume of air remaining in the lungs even after a forcible expiration. So residual volume anta ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ forcible expiration ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ breathe out ಮಾಡಿದ ನಂತರ ಇನ್ನೂ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಳಿ ಲಂಗ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲೇ ರಿಟೈನ್ ಆಗಿರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ರೆಸಿಡ್ಯೂವಲ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ. ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಟೋಟಲ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಏರ್ ಅ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ಅ ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್. ಒಂದು ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಬ್ರೀದ್ ಔಟ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ನೋ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಆಲ್ಟರ್ನೇಟ್ ಆಗಿ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. ಸೊ ಒಂದು ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಎಷ್ಟು ಗಾಳಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಬ್ರೀದ್ ಇನ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಸಾಧ್ಯ ಅದನ್ನು ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳಿದ್ರೆ ಟೋಟಲ್ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಏರ್ ಅ ಪರ್ಸನ್ ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ಅ ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್. ಒಂದು ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಬ್ರೀದ್ ಇನ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಗಾಳಿಯನ್ನು ನಾವು ಬಾಡಿಯಿಂದ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಟರಿ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಇಸ್ ಫಂಕ್ಷನಲ್ ರೆಸಿಡೆನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ. ಇಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ವಾಲ್ಯೂಮ್ ಆಫ್ ಏರ್ ದ್ಯಾಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ರಿಮೇನ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಲಂಗ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ಟರ್ ಅ ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್. ಒಂದು ನಾರ್ಮಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ ವಾಟ್ ಈಸ್ ದ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಏರ್ ರಿಟೈನ್ಡ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಲಂಗ್ಸ್ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಫಂಕ್ಷನಲ್ ರೆಸಿಡೆನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. Next is vital capacity. Vital capacity means it is maximum volume of air that a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. ಅದರರ್ಥ ಮ್ಯಾಕ್ಸಿಮಮ್ ಅಮೌಂಟ್, ಲಾರ್ಜ್ ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಏರ್ ಒಂದು ಪರ್ಸನ್ ಬ್ರೀದ್ ಇನ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬೋದು ಒಂದು ಫೋರ್ಸಿಬಲ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪಿರೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ಬ್ರೀದ್ ಔಟ್ ಆದ ನಂತರ ಅದನ್ನು ವೈಟಲ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಒನ್ ಇಸ್ ದ ಟೋಟಲ್ ಲಂಗ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ. So total lung capacity means it is the total volume of our accommodated air in the lungs at the end of forcible inspiration. Forcible ಆಗಿ ಇನ್ಸ್ಪೈರ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಅಮೌಂಟ್ ಗಾಳಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಲಂಗ್ಸಲ್ಲಿ ರಿಟೈನ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಅಂಥದ್ದನ್ನು ಟೋಟಲ್ ಲಂಗ್ ಕೆಪಾಸಿಟಿ ಅಂತ ಕರಿತೀವಿ. So once again to discuss, a tidal volume is volume of air inspired or expired during normal respiration. Inspiratory reserved volume is additional volume of air a person can inspire by forcible inspiration. Expiratory reserve volume, it is additional volume of air a person can expire by a forcible expiration. Residual volume, a volume of air remaining in the lungs even after a forcible expiration. Inspiratory capacity, it is the total volume of air a person can inspire after a normal expiration. Expiratory capacity, total volume of air a person can expire after a normal inspiration. Functional residential capacity, it's the volume of air that will remain in the lungs after a normal expiration. Vital capacity, maximum volume of air that a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. And the last one is total lung capacity, where the total volume of our accommodated air in the lungs which is at the end of forced inspiration. These are about different types of respiratory volumes in detail. Next is about exchange of gases. So we'll wind up the session here itself. In today's class, we did discuss different types of respiratory organs which are present in lower organisms, different types of respiratory organs which are present in their life cycle, and we studied about human respiratory system, which are the organ systems involved in human respiratory system, mechanism of breathing involving inspiration and expiration, how pressure gradient affects the inspiration and expiration, and finally about respiratory capacities and volumes. That will be 9 different types we have studied, and in next class we will be studying about exchange of gases. That's all for today's session. Thank you.